Hello, everybody. I'm Gibbon,
Hello, everybody. I'm Milo.
and this is another wonderful episode of the Arcade Era Power Hour.
Well, we don't know yet if it will be wonderful.
Hey.
Okay, no, have some confidence. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be great.
Optimism and confidence.
Yeah. Woo. Well, I am excited about this Times episode because we're talking about a game that I discovered and had a lot of fun with. It's called Slam Dunk Kong, also known as King Kong 10. But before we get into the topic, let's do news and follow-up.
Not a whole lot on the docket.
Yeah, we haven't had an episode in a while, but it's been slow anyway.
Yeah, our last episode was back in mid-May.
Oops.
And there frankly hasn't been a whole lot of news that falls under our purview.
Yeah, the biggest one was just a few days ago at this point.
Yeah, so Nintendo is gearing up for their next mobile game release, which is going to be Mario Kart Tour. And back in, I want to say June, they did a beta test for it with a limited selection of people in, which I was fortunate enough to be in that. And it was okay, but it got really grindy, and it was just reusing lots of assets from previous Mario Kart games and reusing stages, and just had the most egregious gacha mechanics I'd ever seen. And me and a fellow community member, Mitchell Wolf, kind of generally agreed that it's got solid mechanics that are kind of ruined by the gratuitous free-to-play nature of it.
It's an all too common story.
Yeah. Anyway, it's coming out soon. It's up for pre-registration, and as part of the store page, they put up a sizzle reel video. And in the video, among a bunch of stuff like stages that weren't in the initial game, they revealed that there's costumes for characters and some new characters like Diddy Kong and whatnot. But what we were excited about was the fact that there's a New Donk City track, which was being run in the video by Mario in his New Donk City outfit. Driving the suit with the hat, and even the icon is Mario with the trilby on, and he was driving a cart that is modeled after one of the New Donk taxi cabs.
Cool stuff. Yeah, New Donk continuing to be a good source of inspiration for these spin-off games. Yeah,
and they were using the New Donk City track as sort of and we'll be having as part of the tour part of Mario Kart Tour. There will be tracks. It was unclear if they're tracks directly based on real-world locations or inspired by real-world locations. But either way. New Donk City was the sort of showcase track for that feature.
Yeah, and you could see in the short video there's, as you'd expect, it's in the city, and there's all new kinds of signs up to look at in the background that had some interesting tidbits.
Yeah.
The one I noticed was, Donkey Kong the Musical or something?
Yeah, Donkey Kong the Greatest Musical.
Sure, of course, it would be.
Yeah, that was one thing I noticed, is that it's not just reused Odyssey assets. They actually made new adverts and stuff.
Yeah,
it's got some Mario Kart Donkey Kong stuff on there, like the DK energy drink brand and stuff or whatever. Those fake sponsorships that they've got sort of promotional art for in the last couple Mario Karts.
That kind of stuff has been in the series for a little while, yeah.
So they've got some of that art in there, but they also have new stuff like the Donkey Kong the Greatest Musical and just some storefront signs and whatnot.
I really want to see that musical. Although
I know, right?
There was that old, long playing record that was more or less that. They should just re-release that on Broadway. More news. There was a Donkey Kong 3 shirt available at Yeti with Stanley the Boatman and DK.
Yeah, there's a bit of a story there. It was either right before GDQ or right before RPG Limit Break or one of those events that Yeti goes in for and does a collection of shirts for. One artist on Twitter, one Jaime Ugarte, showed off some teaser art for this Donkey Kong 3 shirt he'd done that has, DK and Stanley and some of the insects and stuff. It's really nice. I'm wearing it right now. But at the time, I was like, oh my god, when is this gonna come out? And he replied, he's like, oh man, it's gonna come out in, an hour and a half. And then it didn't, and he deleted that tweet, and he's like, I'm not sure when it's coming out. And they did
some miscommunication.
The RPG Limit Break collection, and then they discovered that Glow in the Dark exists, and did a month straight of shirts whose designs change when they're glowing in the dark. Wow. And then GDQ happened, and they had their GDQ collection, and they did their summer sweat fest thing. I don't know. They did a bunch of different collections, and around the time I'd kind of given up on this shirt ever materializing, it finally went up on the Yeti. So, and I got it. Yeah, it came out. It's nice. Just due to the nature of the Yeti, you can't get it on the Yeti anymore. But the artist, Jaime Ugarte, does have a personal webpage where he puts up shirts he's done for sale. It's not clear which ones he puts up and why he doesn't put up other ones, and the shirt's not up on there presently, but I don't know, keep an eye on that page.
Maybe bug him on Twitter about it.
Yeah.
Cool. So Nintendo is continuing to update their Switch Online NES titles lineup. As they do, they add 2 or 3 games every month. Usually Japan gets more than the rest of the world does. And in the time since May, when we did our last episode, Donkey Kong Jr., Donkey Kong 3, and Wrecking Crew, the NES ports of all those, have been added. So if you subscribe to the service, you can play all those on your Switch.
Good stuff. And then one last thing that I remembered is the SMB Movie Archive has started releasing the deleted scenes from that one assembly cut VHS they found. So that's exciting.
Yeah, they've been digitizing this old VHS tape and expanded the cut of the film and putting them up on YouTube with commentary and analysis. And that's been really cool to see.
Yeah.
And presumably this is all going to be included in the upcoming Blu-ray release that they're still working on.
The ever upcoming Blu-ray release.
One day it'll be here. So, Slam Dunk Kong. This is a game that I found out about through the Forest of Illusion Twitter account, which has now been sort of become defunct, unfortunately. But they were dedicated to game preservation and obscure Mario-related stuff. And one of the things they posted was a screenshot. And I saw one screenshot of this game and said, I need to play this. So not long after that, I did a stream where I played through the entire game in 2.5 hours. I had to use a version of DOSBox that had save states because the game's so difficult, but I had a great time. So
I had a great time watching him do it. This game is crazy.
It's a really strange kind of mashup of things. I guess I'll set up the sort of details of it first. It was marketed as Slam Dunk Kong, but the in-game name and the title that's shown on the map screen as well is King Kong 10, and it's a mashup of Donkey Kong Country with older Donkey Kong arcade kind of stuff, as well as the Slam Dunk manga. And
yeah,
I'll explain how that works in a minute, but the Chinese title is Guan Long Jin Gang. Okay, I pronounced that terribly, but that translates to Slam Dunk King Kong. And it was released probably in China, most likely in Taiwan, because it was developed in Taiwan. And it was also released in Korea, where it was called Donkey Kong, which translates to Dunk Kong, I think.
That's some nice translingual pun naming there.
Yeah, exactly. I put that into Google Translate, and it said that means dunk bean, but clearly the Kong is just meant to be read phonetically.
Yeah.
So it was made by a company called Bo, which means third wave. It was released on the DOS platform in 1997, and yeah, it's a little hard to find out stuff about it because there's clearly a language barrier, but I found some interviews with the head of the company that were pretty interesting. Reading them through Google Translate ease, trying to pick up what I could.
And just, oh man, the game's so crazy. So let's talk about the influences on this game.
So I mentioned that it seems to be a mashup of Donkey Kong Country with Slam Dunk. Of course, it's also taking influence from the SNES game Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City. So it's taking in all these elements. Yeah, of all things. It's taking in all these weird influences and synthesizing them into this really strange time capsule of the 90s, basically. Because Slam Dunk is this manga by Inoue Takahiko, where the protagonist seems to be inspired by maybe Dennis Rodman's look. He's got bright red hair and he's got the number 10 shirt, and those elements carry through to the protagonist of Slam Dunk Kong, who is a gorilla with a bright red pompadour and the number 10 red shirt.
But the aesthetic of the game is very much Donkey Kong Country. It's all pre-rendered graphics, some of which is just like off-brand DKC. You can tell they've looked at Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Land and Donkey Kong 94 in some respects, because there's just parts of the game and enemies. It's like a couple of the areas are clearly like, yep, this is that one Donkey Kong Country area, and some of the enemies in the game are like, oh look, it's that enemy from DK94, like specifically that enemy, because it's not even like this is a common enemy type and we happen to have the same thing. It's like, no, this was a very specific enemy design.
Yeah, it's really cool how it was interesting how directly they've lifted elements from these games, but they've sort of made something new with it by combining them in this way.
And I can kind of understand why the basketball aesthetic, because this was the same, like just the year prior, Space Jam had come out.
Yeah.
Like this was the height of Michael Jordan basketball mania. And I can totally see the like limited market of what actually gets brought into Japan, and you have people getting Donkey Kong Country 1 stuff around the same time you're getting like Space Jam and Chaos in the Windy City, bootlegs and whatnot. So I can kind of see how this perfect storm happened. But at the same time, it's still crazy.
And it's interesting that this also happened in the East Asian market. This is a game made in Taiwan for release in China and Korea. But these cultural elements had made it over there, and they were also popular there. At the time, I was actually living in Malaysia at this time, and I own a VHS copy of Space Jam that had been recorded with a camcorder off a movie screen, a bootleg.
Classic.
So that connection is there. So, like you said, it uses the aesthetic of Donkey Kong Country with a gorilla going through pre-rendered environments. But a lot of the mechanics are taken from Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City. So in that game, Michael Jordan is in a side-scrolling platformer. He's always dribbling his ball, and he uses the ball as a projectile attack. And also there's backboard hoops just scattered all over the environment for no reason, with no explanation, because basketball is the theme of this world, apparently. And when you dunk into them, they give you a power-up of some kind. And that's carried through into Slam Dunk Kong as well as the preponderance of keys. There are so many keys in this game. They're basically the minor collectible like bananas, but you spend them all the time to get more power-ups.
Yeah. It's so weird.
It's really cool. The other sort of minor connections are the kind of UI that the game uses, where once you collect a power-up, that counter will scroll onto screen and then back off. That's taken from DKC. There is a connection to gorillas in Slam Dunk. One of the main characters is called... his name's Takanori Akagagi, but the main character calls him Gorilla because he's a big guy. And episode 54 of the anime is titled King Kong's Younger Brother, which was a result I got when I searched for Slam Dunk Kong, was a listing for this episode. The title refers to Sakuragi himself, the protagonist, as King Kong's younger brother, metaphorically, because he's taking the place of Akagi in the episode.
Cool.
Weird connection.
Yeah, but I don't know. There's so much stuff going on in this game's design.
So, we'll talk now about the content of the worlds, but I have an opening statement about what the game is. It's kind of a Taiwanese bootleg, right? So it's got clumsy controls. The difficulty is absolutely crushing. You die in one hit. And yet the game is just a joy. It's a delight. I got to the jungle world during my stream and I just couldn't stop laughing and smiling.
Yeah.
I do recommend using save states to get through it. But yeah, playing through it is a strange experience. There's no music during any of the levels. There's just these scattered sound effects. I saw some speculation online that might be because there was an alternate release that was a CD version that had Red Book audio, whereas there was also a floppy release. I don't know about that, but the only version that's archived online is a floppy release. There's a little ditty on the title screen, but nothing during the levels themselves. But there's a lot of little fun things about it. The idle animations that Kong has and his victory animation, aping DKC, of course. Pun intended. The fact that a scoreboard pops up on screen whenever you do in-game actions, and by the end you've got thousands of points, as if this was a real basketball game. And it doesn't control well at all. You have a spin attack when you're on the ground, but every time you do it for an even longer period than the attack lasts afterwards, you're dizzy and you can't move at all and you're vulnerable. So it is the most effective way to attack, but it leaves you open for so long that you really need to be sure when you do it. The other way you can attack is by throwing the basketball down when you're jumping, and that throws a flaming ball that can then hit enemies. But it's really hard to get that to connect because it's got a short projectile motion, and the camera in the game is really jerky, and enemies are fast and they can sneak up on you really quickly. That's probably my main criticism with the game, is the camera, that it just, it's not good. Like, it's not DKC. But yeah, you go through these worlds knocking over enemies and dunking constantly in all these hoops, and that often reveals power-ups. So there's a bunch of power-ups you can get, like armor, extra lives. There's this sort of red cap with wings and eyes. I have no idea what it's supposed to be, but it does a screen clearing bomb attack that just kills everything.
Okay, then.
There's also the secondary main collectible after keys is these things that look like bottles. They look like baby bottles with a sucker on top. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was watching your VOD of your playthrough trying to figure out what those were supposed to be.
Yeah, I wondered if they were maybe supposed to be trophies, but not only do I not know what they are, I don't know what their function in the game is.
Oh, no. You, at one point in your playthrough, you got like 12 of them and it gave you an extra life or something.
Okay, so that's it. Okay, I'd forgotten that. So there you go. That's what they do.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of extra lives if you get keys and then unlock the little red, like lock balls. There's balls floating in the air with a lock on them.
Yeah, they're just red orbs. Like, they're not anything in particular. They're just a red ball.
Mm-hmm.
This game's so weird.
All right. So let's start with sort of where the game is set. It opens on an animated, like a CGI FMV sequence. Kong's in the jungle shooting some hoops, or dunking actually appropriately. When out of nowhere a cage crashes down on his head. And the cage is attached to a helicopter which lifts him off and carries him away. Where is it taking him?
How did the bottom of the cage get there? It starts flying towards this city, which is very obviously the Seattle skyline.
And you picked this up straight away because you live near there.
Yeah, I live over there, and I saw the sort of silhouette of the Space Needle. I'm like, is that that can't be the Space Needle.
It's 100% the Space Needle.
There's other buildings in the skyline in the game, and I compared it to an actual shot of the Seattle skyline, and I'm like, oh my god, they have the other actual Seattle skyline buildings there too.
It matches up.
It matches up just 1-to-1. He's getting flown into Seattle. Okay.
Before he can get there, the helicopter is struck by lightning out of nowhere and goes down. At that point, you're dumped on the world map and you see a series of islands, and your trail leads from the helicopter crash through these worlds. And the worlds, you start in a construction site, very appropriate to Donkey Kong mythos.
Yeah.
And then you go to a city, and then a sunken ship, and then a jungle. That's what you see on the world map.
Yep.
So yeah, let's go through those as they come up. So yeah, you start in a construction site. There's obviously girders everywhere. There's cranes as a platforming element.
There's like overturned brick carts, which look kind of like mine carts with handles attached to them.
Very much so. And there's also chains hanging down, which you can climb on. Climbing is a mechanic in this game, which actually took me a bit to figure out because my up key wasn't mapped properly. There's a lot of electrical generators as hazards. That's just the main hazard that will instantly kill you. But it's like, why do they need this much electricity?
There's also spikes, but yeah, spikes.
Some of the enemies you see in this world, they're mostly robots, but the first thing you see is a dog, sort of, I guess, evoking a guard dog for the construction site.
It actually reminded me of the ones from Donkey Kong Country 3, just because those are more quadrupedal.
Yeah, crimp, right?
Yeah, I think. But yeah, it's the same type of enemy as like Claptrap.
Or even Snapjaw from
yeah.
DK Jr. And there's robots, they all have sort of construction hats on, which is funny detail. But one has a pick and like tank treads. One has a kind of rotating gun thing that shoots at you, which I wasn't sure of the function of in a construction site. But another one, sort of, its body is a jackhammer and it's bouncing along. So it's pretty cute.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very mechanized construction site, which is interesting. You don't see any humans in the game, but apparently they've gone full.
That's not entirely true. Jason's in the game.
Oh gosh, you're right. That could be an ape wearing a mask. You don't know.
That's fair. I don't know.
We'll get to that.
This construction site is very appropriate. Seattle does have one of the highest concentrations of cranes and construction work in mainland U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and of course, it ties it in very clearly with the early Donkey Kong games. But it's also mirroring Donkey Kong Land, sort of, because that had both jungle levels taken from DKC, but also World 4 was Big Ape City, where you had both construction site archetype levels and city, just straight up buildings and stuff.
And one of the things each world has unique to it is a different hoop type in this area. It's just straight up a basketball hoop, but they also have different like bouncy thing, and in this world it's the traditional Donkey Kong Country tires.
So they don't roll their stationary, but it's another thing that's lifted straight from DKC. And there's also other hazards like the wrecking balls. I still have nightmares about those wrecking balls. The hit detection is just off the scale, and there's a series of them spinning, and you got to get through them. It's the worst. But actually, the level design is pretty interesting. It's not just left to right. There's a lot of up and down. And doubling back. It's pretty cool. I did appreciate that.
The boss of this world makes the most annoying noise.
Oh, I was actually last night when I reviewed my own VOD, which was weird. I turned off the sound because I can't, like, the sound of my own voice is like weird. But yeah, the boss is another robot that's built into the body of a steamroller. A bit like the Guts tank from Mega Man 2.
Yeah, very evocative of the Guts tank. And he's wearing a hard hat. Like, he's following OSHA regulations.
Even though he has a metallic head, he's making sure to wear that hat. Yes. And I also noticed that he clearly has a cigarette sticking out of his mouth.
Yep. He's visibly smoking on the job.
Yes. Robots smoke in this world.
Oh, this is Seattle construction site. Who knows what he's smoking?
Okay. So he's got a pretty simple attack pattern. All the bosses do. They pretty much just walk back and forward, and when they get close to you, they do one of their attacks. In this case, he tries to ram you and slams into the wall, and sometimes he'll make tiny girders fall down from the sky that might catch you out. Which
is a very DK94 type thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do like when you defeat the bosses, they flip out and cycle through their animations really quickly. And in the process, this guy spews out just fountains of bolts. You had a note here about how some of the enemies reminded you of Wrecking Crew stuff.
Yeah, because Wrecking Crew, like the original Wrecking Crew, some of the enemies were like those little living wrench guys and stuff. And then in Wrecking Crew 98, they had more this type of, animated construction robot type things. But it's called Wrecking Crew 98 because it came out in 98. So it actually came out after this game. Just something it reminded me of.
Yeah, it's cool. Both drawing from the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it is easier in a game to have you destroy robots than... I guess it could have been different animals that had construction hats on or something.
Yeah,
but
well...
I'm not sure what the intention is with this city and who lives there.
Yeah, but remember that this was made in China, where they have stricter regulations on that sort of thing.
That's true. All right, so once you beat the boss, there's 6 levels in each world. One of them is the boss level. And yeah, you'll move on to the next island, which is the city.
I would have liked to see some more variety level to level. Every level just sort of looks the same aesthetically. Because in Donkey Kong Country, you'd like, oh, this is the jungle world, but within that world, you've got like you've got a handful of jungle levels, which are each like, here's the daytime jungle level, and here's the jungle level in the rain, and here's the jungle level at night sort of thing. But you also had like, here's a caves level and an underwater level, yada yada yada. This one was just like, nope, it's all the same sort of construction site level. So.
Yeah, which also makes you think, since each world is located on a discrete island, that means that one city has been built, but now they're building another city.
Yeah.
Whereas they should be mixed together like they are in Donkey Kong Land. But I guess, you've got your big city and your big city 2.
Yeah, something like that.
New big city.
A new Donk City, you might say.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So the second world is the actual built city, and I like it a lot. There's a lot to look at in the background.
Yeah.
It's also the only world that it's got 2 things going on, basically. You start out on the streets, right. And then you fall into the sewers.
Completely new tile set for the sewers.
Yeah, exactly. So what enemies do we encounter in this world? Firstly, you see a bat, which is not unlike flip-flaps in DK64 is what I thought of, but obviously this predates that as well. But there's bats in DK94, right?
Yeah, I want to say so.
But you soon find, as you alluded to earlier, Jason.
Yeah,
It's just a guy in a boiler suit holding an axe and with a ski mask on.
Yep.
Is it bloodstained? I don't recall.
Yeah, there's some stains of indeterminate substance.
It's probably jam. You do actually see this guy on the title screen. You've got Kong like going up for a dunk into the camera, and behind him you can see some of the enemies from the game sort of menacing up at him, and one of them is this guy.
Yeah, it's a very, very Michael Jordan pose.
You also see rubbish bins with googly eyes, angry eyes, in fact.
Yeah, which is just straight up an enemy from DK94 and Mario vs. Donkey Kong 1.
Totally. And because there's always one, I think, enemy in these worlds that throws projectiles at you. This one throws apple cores. Yeah. Very deadly, of course, to an ape. And when you're in the sewers, you come across robotic rats, which are huge.
Oh my god,
it's more robots.
Their design reminds me so much of Rocky and Bullwinkle, because there's an arc where there's these robotic mice being made by the moon people. Don't ask, but just the way they were drawn reminds me of these mice a lot. So,
sure.
Yeah, sure. Roll with it.
Yeah, it's great. And I guess it makes sense that if you're constructing a city using robots, you're going to have some robots ending up in the final product somehow. Life finds a way,
I guess
right?
if you have robotic mice that you've built in the sewer, they're making sure there's not any other infestations going on.
Oh, that's really clever.
That was actually that was the entire sort of story kernel behind the Mousers in Ninja Turtles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's like, let's make these little robotic rodent things that'll take care of the pest problems in the city sewers.
Do you think they lifted that element from Ninja Turtles?
Who knows?
So I mentioned that there's a lot of fun things to look at in the background. When you're in the city area, you can see a skyline behind you, which is not inside the levels. The Seattle skyline, you don't see the Space Needle.
Yeah.
But you do see. I did like. There's one office building, and some of the lights are on in the windows, but they're different colors, and they actually form a love heart, which is kind of cute. Mm-hmm. You also see big signs for Disambor, the company that made the game. So classic self-promotion, Rare style. There's one that says Jero Hotel. I don't know what that means. That could be a reference to something. Maybe it's something that they could see from their offices. But there is actually some evidence of construction in the cities, contrary to my point earlier, because you see these fences or maybe containers that have a screen printed picture of a gorilla wearing a construction hat on them, as well as some text in Chinese, which I couldn't.
Yeah, they're very evocative of those like sort of always wear your safety helmet on site signs and stuff that you see around all over the place here. Because like I could literally walk a block from my apartment and there's a crane in a construction site. So
yeah, and the hats, the construction hats that we're talking about are like the yellow dome ones. What else was there? There's a neon sign that actually shows Slam Dunk Kong himself playing basketball, which I found really strange. And of course you have to extrapolate from that what the lore of this place is, which could tie into why they kidnapped him. So maybe people in the city know about him. He's a celebrity in these islands, and they wanted to kidnap him, maybe to play on their professional basketball team, and that's possible. Why they're bringing him to the city. That's my headcanon anyway.
Oh no.
But clearly somebody knows about this guy in the city already.
Yeah.
You also see other basketball-related graffiti later on, which is kind of nice, done in a painted style. That's kind of cute. Yeah. And as we said, every world has a different bouncing mechanic. This one has awnings on the buildings. which again is something that Donkey Kong Land did as well, whether it was lifted directly again or whether they're just, taking the same inspirations and parallel evolution. I don't know.
So there is a sort of metropolitan city area in Wario Land 2. And I've always sort of headcanoned personally that it's the same city as like Big City in DK94 and Big Ape City in Donkey Kong Land. And it's especially apropos here because the boss of that world is a jersey-wearing, basketball-playing rabbit that you have to shoot hoops against. So just sort of the Big City basketball theme coming through again.
Yeah, that's an excellent connection. I love that. And it shows that platformers were, like cartoony platformers, were doing this thing where you would set a level in a city and have that be a little bit dissonant. Long before Mario Odyssey took on the same kind of aesthetic, although they did it well. So yeah, the boss of this world is another ape, actually, a rival ape, much like Jungle Beat.
Yeah.
He's got dark fur, and I couldn't really tell what he was supposed to be homaging, because he's definitely homaging something. But I cracked it last night. I figured out that this guy is Terry Bogard from King of Fighters and Fatal Fury.
He really is. And once I saw your note, oh God, you're right.
So he doesn't have the hat, but he has a blonde hair with the thing sticking out of the front and a ponytail at the back. He's got a red jacket and red shoes, and yeah, that's Terry Bogard's design, spot on. He even uses Terry Bogard's signature attack as one of his attack patterns. The power wave is the localization for it, but he punches the ground and a shockwave comes up in front of him. Originally I was trying to figure out what this was, because he's got two other moves that he does, which are clearly lifted from Street Fighter, the Shoryuken and the Hadouken, which is the spinning uppercut and the energy ball projectile. So because he had a yellow ponytail and he's doing the Shoryuken and Hadouken, those are all things that appear in the Mega Man X series, and Zero has special moves that are similar to Street Fighter special moves, and he also has one where he punches the ground and a big shockwave comes up. But it's a little bit different to that, and it really seems like they are going directly to that King of Fighters inspiration, especially because of the design of the character.
This game's so weird.
And I did look it up. There are spinning uppercuts and projectiles in King of Fighters as well that other characters do, but they have specific body motions that are different from the Street Fighter ones. And this one is this ape character in Slam Dunk Kong is clearly taking those from Street Fighter as much as he's taking the power.
So this is King of Fighters. Do we call him Terry Kong, or in the tradition of Slam Dunk Kong, who's just named after the manga he's pastiching, is this King of Fighters Kong?
Fatal Fury Kong.
Fatal Fury Kong.
Fatal Kong?
Fury Kong.
Or Fighter Kong. Because Fighter is in both Street Fighter and King of Fighters.
Oh, yeah, and that fits with the naming convention later established in Jungle Beat, where Kongs are just named after their fighting style.
Sumo Kong.
Yep. Karate Kong. Ninja Kong.
Dreadlog
Kong. Yeah, that one's a little...
That's the outlier.
Well, he's named differently in other languages. Like in some of the other languages, he's like, oh, this is Rasta Kong, but that gets into a bit like, is this racist territory?
It does.
So,
what's his Japanese name?
You know what? I want to say Dread Kong, but let me look it up real quick.
All right, while you do that, I will mention that in the game files is a file called cast.txt, and I wondered if that was a listing of all the enemy characters and would give them names, but when I tried to open it, it was just gibberish. I tried rendering it in Chinese characters and nothing happened.
Yeah, no, it's just Dread Kong in Japanese, but it's Rasta Kong in French, German, and Italian.
Yeah, the European localization of Jungle Beat was a little iffy. They used the original names for the animal buddies.
I mean,
They didn't change them
the
at all.
English localization for Jungle Beat wasn't that great either.
Yeah,
So.
it cut out some stuff. So yeah, we don't have official names for any of these guys. I don't know if that file I found is just game data that's meant to be pulled internally and not meant to be read. There wasn't a README or anything else. So yeah, I guess we have to name these characters. So I'm happy with Fighter Kong for this guy, or Terry Kong to his friends. All right. So once you beat him, you move on to World 3, and this is where the game leans more heavily into the Donkey Kong Country influence.
The DK94 and Donkey Kong Land influences were much more prevalent in the first two worlds.
And once you get into World 3, you immediately think, hey, this is just straight up stolen from Donkey Kong Country, because you're in a coral reef, and they didn't directly lift the graphics themselves, but it's clearly
super evocative.
Yeah, it's inspired by the underwater stages in DKC.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no aquatic ambience, no music at all. But I think even by copying something that's so great, like, it ends up looking good anyway.
Yeah.
So and actually, thankfully, you don't swim in these levels, because swimming is always my least favorite part of a platformer, and a lot of other people's as well. This game handles it much like Bubsy and Fractured Fairy Tales on the Jaguar. You just run and jump as normal, but maybe with less gravity, so it's a little bit slower, and you feel like you're underwater, but you don't have to put up with the different controls that swimming brings.
Yeah.
So they're structured like normal platforming stages, and it's not just coral reefs, which is cool. There's also shipwrecks that you jump over and traverse as you go through the levels, as well as other detritus like oil barrels that are leaking out and stuff like that.
I was a little disappointed that you don't really go into any of the sunken ships, because like over in like the Wonder Boy games, it's sort of a trope to have like an upside down sunken ship level, where it's like it's not just a ship level, it's a ship level that's upside down.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So that would have been sort of neat to see here, but as we were saying earlier, there's really only like the world has the one level archetype and sticks to it. So.
But at least they spice up the coral reef by having these ships around. Not just as background elements, you do jump on them and stuff. So what are the enemies that we find in this world? Well, the first thing you see is a yellow fish. I tried to figure out what kind of species this was calling back to, but it's sort of, well, actually, its shape is not dissimilar to a banana, appropriately. It's got a yellow sort of moon shape to its body, sort of thing. And then you run into some giant sea urchins, of course, which are sort of an obstacle. There's some cute little anglerfish, which have big eyes, and they're like... There's anemones on the seafloor that spit out smaller fish in a line. I guess that's kind of the projectile for this.
The Clambo.
Yeah, like a Clambo. And like the whatever they are that spit out the barracudas in DKC 3.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the bouncing mechanic in this world is one of those kind of organisms. I wasn't sure what they were exactly. I think there's something like a sea squirt.
Yeah.
You know, like a little lump that clings onto rocks in the sea, and
like a limpet,
kind of
sort
bumpy.
of.
Yeah. But it's soft, not a shell-based thing. Yeah.
It's a thing.
Whatever they're called.
Sea life. Yay!
Sea life. Yeah, there's a lot of variety in sea life, but there's also these weird things that I don't remember the name of.
Yeah, there's also, some hammerhead sharks in these levels. Some adorable little purple squids.
So cute.
Very, very evocative of Squidge from DKC 1.
And the sharks too, although they're a different species.
Yeah.
Like Chomp.
Yeah, you mentioned that the bouncing thing for this world. I think we neglected. Did we cover that in the previous sort of metropolitan area? They had a different sort of basketball hoop. They had sort of like a neon lit up basketball hoop.
The hoop design actually has Slam Dunk Kong's face on it again.
Yeah.
And it's all bright and colorful.
But
really
in the coral reef world, they're getting a little more creative.
Yes.
And the hoops are these sort of shell. How would you describe these?
Yeah, they're like a bivalve that's opened up.
Yeah.
Like a clam thing-ish. And
yeah.
so you see the distinctive, pattern of a shell above it, and the bottom part is the hoop, and you slam into that, and then they explode.
Yep, and then they explode and give you your points and power-ups, and
you actually end up destroying a lot of sea life in this world. And that includes the boss.
Yeah, the boss, which is such a Donkey Kong Country design. It's a giant crab.
A giant enemy crab.
Giant enemy crab that does crab things.
Like shooting missiles out of its mouth.
Okay, that's less crab things. The crabs in Metal Slug that have tanks on their backs.
Sure. It does do that attack where it sort of digs into the ground and rocks fly out everywhere, which is something that real crabs do. That was really cool.
Yeah. But the reason I say it's such a Donkey Kong Country design is that, like Squitter, it's just got a bunch of tennis shoes on its leg.
I love that. That's so good.
It's like, well, okay. Arthropods with tennis shoes go.
And I think it's animated really well too.
Yeah, he is actually.
One of its attacks is that it just does like a flip and just swings through the air, flying around, doing many flips and then landing on you usually. With most of the bosses, I haven't mentioned this yet, but it's really, you can't do the spin attack to damage them because it's too dangerous. You'll just instantly get hit afterwards and die. And as you progress, they have a lot of health. So you really have to use that hoop, that throwing ball down move. Sorry.
The
you
dunk?
have to.
No, not exactly a dunk. I don't know what,
it's not really.
I want to call it like a meteor smash or something.
It is. Because you jump and then throw a ball downwards at an angle.
And it's like flaming while it goes down because you've thrown it with such force.
Yeah, he's so hardcore. But you have to do that to hit the bosses, and you have to be relatively close to do that, although they give you platforms in all the boss arenas to get above them. And there's a lot of like back and forth, you running up and throwing a few balls and then running away, and that's how the boss fights go basically.
At least they have health bars in this game. Because in Donkey Kong Country, you just sort of have to go by what the boss is doing. Like in Donkey Kong Country 2, it's better because the bosses have distinctive phases, so you can kind of tell how far along in the fight you are. Some bosses more easily than others. Like in Creepy Crow, it's really easy to determine how far into the fight you are. But in Donkey Kong Country 1, it's just sort of like, well, he keeps speeding up, and I'm not sure how many times I need to do this before he dies.
Good point, yeah.
But in Slam Dunk Kong, there's actually like a health meter with pips.
Yeah, but they're not like Donkey Kong Country bosses where they have an attack pattern and then become vulnerable, and then you hit them.
Nope.
It's more just a constant damage contest where you always die in one hit, and you have to hit them up to 20 times by the final boss without ever getting hit. And just sneaking in attacks when you can.
Pretty much.
I do love this game, but oh man, it's a pain to play.
It's Nintendo hard.
It's worse. All right. So once you beat the crab, you hit its weak point for whatever damage. You get to the jungle world, which again,
we both had to stop and laugh for a while at this point in Milo's stream, because it's just jungle hijinks. It's just jungle hijinks.
Even the trees look the same.
It's pre-rendered banana trees and like dirt hills, and like it's got little crocodile enemies and little pig enemies, and it's just jungle hijinks.
And I love it.
Oh no, it's great.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of variety in the enemies in this world. You get the scorpions, which are the projectile type. They spit something from their tails at you like real scorpions do.
Yeah. Death. They spit death at you.
That's right. Another DK land reference, I think. There's pigs, which look similar to hogwash, although they don't fly.
Yeah.
They do jump.
They do jump good, in the words of Samurai Jack.
Jump good. I love that episode. There's large flies that spin in circles. There's the piranha plant.
Yeah, the flesh pink piranha plants with the dead vacant stare with their too far apart eyes.
They're pretty disturbing.
It's just very, very haunting. It's one of the, like, we need to screenshot that and put it up on some cursed images Twitter. I don't know. And
yeah, there's so much like the piranha plants in Mario, or at least the ones in Yoshi that you do see in some other Mario installments, but just the blank color all over and the googly eyes. DKC did get carnivorous plant enemies by returns, but this is one of those cases where they're pulling from something else, I guess.
These actually look more like the ones in Tropical Freeze in the fruit island.
Yes. But the eyes, the haunting eyes.
Speaking of piranha plants, there's some other Mario-isms in this world with the mushrooms and stuff.
Yeah, they're the bounce pads, yeah.
Yeah. I just watched the playthrough, and I can't remember for the life of me what the hoops in this world are.
The hoops are just normal backboards, but wooden slats.
Oh, right. Yeah, they're wooden slatted backboards in this one.
Yeah. And there's floating logs that you jump on as well.
Yeah.
So what are the next enemy you run into is surprising. It's a dinosaur. It's like a mini T-Rex, a theropod kind of design. And cartoony, but it's just really fun because you don't see living dinosaurs in any of the DK games.
Yeah, you really don't. I always kind of wanted like a hypothetical Donkey Kong Country 4 to involve time travel and just have like woolly rhinos and dinosaur kremlings and stuff.
Good idea. Yeah, I like that. You could have like the Rambi equivalent would be Rambi's ancestor, who's all woolly.
Yeah. Before my brain knew how to process punny level names, I had fanoned that Ropey of like Ropey Rumpus or Ropey Rampage or whatever that level was called was the name of Rambi's ancestor. Ropey the woolly rhino. I don't know.
That's adorable. That's classic, like, child fanon. I like that.
And, looking at it now, it's like, no, this is the level that introduces rope vines and all of the different types of those. So, of course, it's called that. But as a kid, I was like, oh, Ropey, that's a name. I don't know. But yeah, and just more DKC-isms. There's the next signs and stuff.
Yeah. Always when you finish a level in this game, it's just sort of a patch of the level that once you get there, you're done. But to mark that, they put a little next sign. So in the water stages, for example, there's actually a barrel, which is the only time you see barrels in this game. That has next printed on it. But in this, it's very much the exit signs from DKC, but with next written on them.
Yeah.
I noticed another maybe DK reference. Actually, it's not, because this predates DK64 as well.
Predate
but
DK64.
You climb vines that have at the top a little leaf propeller that's holding them aloft.
Yeah, exactly like the one.
Exactly like it. But I guess they ripped it off from Slam Dunk Kong.
Oh man, it comes full circle. Some more Donkey Kong Land. Well, I don't know if this is directly Donkey Kong Land, but there's Nautilus shells in the levels.
They obviously wanted to put blast barrels in because they're a staple. But instead of just ripping it off directly in this case, they giant Nautilus shells, just like you see in DKL, but they're empty, and they for some reason shoot you out. They do rotate, and then it's kind of hard to time it right, but
Yeah.
there are some sections where you go through a little sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wonder if those weren't intended for World 3 and they'd intended to have different sorts of blast barrels for each world too.
Oh yeah, I
don't
can see
know.
that. Actually, that is the only thing that makes sense, because why these shells are just floating in midair is unexplained, but it would work in the water level. But yeah. The other two enemies from this world, there's a snail, like a giant snail, which they do have in Africa.
Oh yeah,
but it's got spikes all over it as well. It has a different attack power where it rolls up and then comes at you faster once it sees you. And the last enemy, I had trouble passing what it's supposed to be. It's a little green quadruped with spines.
Fast.
There was actually a part of the stream where I just sat on a log and watched this thing go back and forward, trying to puzzle out what the sprite was trying to depict.
And just because of, like, you know, recording distortion, you can't really just pause and see what it is, you know?
So it's either some kind of lizard or crocodile, but it doesn't have a long snout or tail. It's just kind of a lump on legs, but it's green.
Yeah.
And I swear it is wearing a monocle. It's got a little gold chain.
I agree with you. It definitely looks like it's wearing a monocle.
Which just elevates it into top tier enemy territory.
Yeah. I don't know. I should commission someone to draw fan art of that.
Good idea. We should name it then in that case.
Yeah.
Fancy Liz. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll come up with something.
Oh, it's gotta have a K name.
Oh yeah. If it's supposed to be a Kremling, maybe.
Yeah.
Analog.
Who knows?
So there's two tiny little details that I just loved that contributed to my joy at playing this world. And it's to do with the background, because even though the foreground and all the level elements are reminiscent of DKC very much, the background is some far mountains and then a placid lake in front of them. And it just reminded me of the DKC 3 lake stages that you start the game on.
Yeah.
And yeah,
some nice parallax
really well
layering going on there too.
Yeah. And you can even see passing by in the background sometimes tiny little birds, little V's flapping along from one side of the screen to the other.
It's a very nice world.
Yeah, it's lovely. Does it have spikes in the pits, or is it just rows of piranha players?
I want to say both.
Yeah. So like DKC 2 jungle style spike pits.
Kind of,
There are no bottomless pits to fall in this game. There's always going to be hazards at the bottom. In the first world, it's just row upon row of generators sparking at you that you fall in. So I want to get your thoughts on the boss of this world, because I have trouble interpreting exactly what it's supposed to be.
Oh, man.
It's another ape.
So it is another ape. It's got some face paint on. It's sort of gray brown in color. It does have, I don't know if I'd call it a top knot, but it's got
it's just bunched up on top.
It's kind of got that, I don't want to say like stereotypical witch doctor aesthetic thing going.
Yeah, that's what I was leaning to. So I'm glad you said that. But it's sort of, this tribal kind of quote unquote
yeah, that's a good way of putting it,
aesthetic. And he's got a big club that he will throw at you, but then he'll still be holding.
Video games.
And he has a jump attack that he does as well with a silly little animation. But
he has another attack too.
Go on.
He throws poo at you.
Yes, he's an ape that throws turds. He has one attack where he beats his chest, and enemies that have appeared through the world will pop into frame on the screen and fall down. But among those enemies, there'll also be just the classic swirly poo type gag that just falls down and can kill you.
Because of course it can.
Mm-hmm. Well, why wouldn't it?
Yep.
It's huge. It's really enormous. I wonder if he made them, because they really are big.
Yeah, and that fight took a long time.
Oh God. Yeah.
I remember by the end of your stream, we were both just, you could hear the exhaustion in your voice, and my comments on the stream chat were like, "You can do it!" Yeah!
Oh yes, I appreciate that. Like I said earlier, he does have 20 health. You need to hit this guy 20 times without ever getting hit yourself.
Which is just vastly more than any other boss in the game.
Yeah. There's, like I said, there's power-ups in the game that give you armor. Well, the armor actually just gives you invincibility for a short time. But the boss fights don't have anything like that. It's just you, a ball, and a boss.
Yep.
And lots of slog. Hard.
And you're playing basketball and they aren't.
Yeah, that's true. None of the enemies in the game share the theme of basketball.
No.
But I don't suppose they did in Chaos in the Windy City either, did they? I only played half of that game. I don't know what to name this guy. I guess he's a Kong as well, honorary.
This is I'm just gonna go pure fanwank and say that this is Tiki Tong before his spirit gets trapped in the voodoo doll. I don't know.
So that happened within living memory.
Sure. Why not? I mean, this is obviously DK Island. Look at it. This entire game is the story of young Junior getting transported from the locales of the arcade games to Donkey Kong Island.
Absolutely.
So,
and that is my thesis about this game. This is the perfect bridging story between the arcade era and Rare's Donkey Kong Country era.
Is.
Yes.
I think like if this game had been ported to GBA, it would have gotten just the right amount of, not downscaling, but like, so the pre-rendering in this game is just a little too shiny to match up to the Donkey Kong Country games, which have sort of a gradient over them to make it not look all glossy and computer animated. And I feel like if this game had gotten a GBA port, it would have that would have happened to the graphics as part of the translation to the 32-bit platform.
Yeah, I could see that. It's clear that Third Wave did not have Silicon Graphics workstations.
Yeah.
But they did what they could with what they had, and I think they did a good job in that.
Yeah, no, the game looks great. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying
but
thinking
I agree.
about it,
yeah,
like that sort of port would have maybe made the graphics just that little bit more in line with the Rareware titles. And
yeah, I like that. Not only does it have this dynamic where the first stages take from arcade era influences and the later stages take from Donkey Kong Country era influences, but the main character himself, Slam Dunk Kong, you could see that as an in-between stage of development, a teenage stage between the childhood of Junior and the adulthood or young adulthood.
Yeah, he's even wearing a
Donkey
jersey, and Junior in the jersey is his most updated design from the cereal boxes that Nintendo pretends never happened.
Yeah,
so,
yes, very much good. So that's our thesis on the game. Like, they do sort of take a left turn in the design into this slam dunk manga influence for his look, but I think it can work as a middle stage where he's got a really ostentatious hairdo. Junior only has a few little strands, but then of course DK has the famous quiff or quaff or whatever it is. And you can see him experimenting in this way in between times and getting into basketball in a big way as a fad that he then drops later.
In the words of Terry Pratchett, it looks like there's a duck's arse on your forehead.
Indeed. I think I had another point there, but now I can get the duck's arse pushed it out.
But yeah, no, it's a great sort of in between
Oh,
yeah.
you do see Donkey Kong play basketball in Hoops 3-on-3 on the DS.
That's true.
And Sports Mix.
Man, that's such a good game. The 3-on-3.
I love Hoops. It's so good. It's got Dixie Kong as a playable, and I just loved
the only
making
way
three.
that game
It's
could
got
be
Birdo.
better is if it had a story mode.
Yeah, that is true.
Like if it had been like the old golf and tennis games that had sort of like a
handheld
story
ones,
RPG, I
Yeah.
would have just loved, like, even if you're just consigned to Mario for the story mode, just dribbling around the overworld and going from whatever match to match they put you in. That could have been cool.
That game kind of tentatively falls in our remit because of Birdo, right?
Yeah. We haven't really shaken out what exactly that means for us.
Yeah, including Birdo has a lot of implications for a lot of Mario
Yeah,
spin-off games,
we need to sit down with that at some point. It is on our list of things to cover in a future podcast.
Yeah, that's cool. All right.
So,
should we cover the game's ending now? Because you get
let's go
FMV
ahead.
sequence.
Mm-hmm.
After beating... Oh, did we name this guy? The ape guy?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, we just named him
has-
Tiki Tong.
Okay, sure. He's Tiki Tong. He has similarities to Eddie the Mean Old Yeti from the cartoon show as well.
He kind of does. Yeah, I can see that.
So, yeah, okay. It's Tiki Tong. Great.
I don't know.
So
I
once you
don't
beat
know.
him... No, it's fine. Yeah. Fine with me. So you get a shot of Kong, like, looking at... I've been calling him Kong through the notes just because it's... he's not, he's not officially Donkey Kong, and it's a bit clumsy to say Slam Dunk Kong every time. But anyway, you get a shot of him looking out over a cliff, and you see the forest, and it's actually pine forest, not the jungle that we've been through so far, which does actually, again, match up with DK Island. But I noticed that it's different to the jungle area that he was in the intro to the game, so I'm not sure what to make of that exactly.
He did not make it home.
Well, that's the thing. He's looking out over this forest, and in the middle of the forest is a house. It's just a log cabin, and you can just make out a tiny figure playing with a ball. And the door to the house opens, light spills out, and the figure approaches the house. Kong is gazing down on this scene. His expression softens, and then with a triumphant music sting, he leaps from the cliff.
Because he
stretched.
Finally found someone else in this game that plays basketball.
And freeze frame, and that's the end.
Frame. And we go back to the scrolling marquee design ripped straight from Donkey Kong Country that gives us
the graphical effect for the title screen, again, ripped from DKC. So what's your take on this ending? You said maybe he hasn't met these people before.
I don't know. Like, he hasn't met these people before, or, as you say, it's a different type of forest than the opening sequence.
Yeah.
So, but, like, if you hand wave that, like, maybe he made it back to where he started out.
Yeah, that's the other
know.
interpretation, is that all this time he's been making his way home from where the helicopter took him, and he's finally made it. I think that's what I'm leaning towards. You can hand wave away the different forest thing, like he lives in the forest but he plays basketball in the jungle, and they're really not that far away from each other. We see that.
I did notice, I think if I'm remembering this correctly, the type of hoop he's playing with in the opening FMV is the same type of planked backboard that's in the jungle world.
Yes, I think you're right about that.
So that would support the, like, he's made it back to his home turf.
Yeah,
argument.
And these people are his family who he was separated from. So maybe the other person playing with the ball is
Pink Jr. I don't know.
Pink Jr. Perfect. or a very young Diddy or something.
Pinky Kong.
Yeah. Whoever Pink Jr. grows up to be, whether
buddy.
it's swanky or funky or whatever.
Yeah.
Or it could be Candy Kong, whatever.
That's true.
And there's clearly at least one other person who's inside the house who opens the door. So senior, probably.
Yeah.
Because at this time, if he is known as Slam Dunk Kong, he's not Donkey Kong yet. He hasn't.
Yeah.
He hasn't
He's
ascended
Donkey
to that title.
Kong.
Exactly.
Or what was the Korean title? Donkey Kong.
Yeah, it's kind of an approximation in Korean phonetics. I struggle with that.
Yeah.
Google Translate has like a talk function where it'll tell you how it's pronounced.
Ooh, that's neat, but also,
Well, I think it's native speakers doing it, recording, because they're different voices that have recorded the different languages. Because I tested out the Chinese title and the Korean title, and they're completely different people.
I don't know. I've been using Google Translate's mobile features of scanning pictures and stuff a lot, because there's this light novel series I like that the translations were going way too slowly for me, so I just got all of the light novels and have been sort of pigeon translating them. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So that's Slam Dunk Kong.
Yeah, that is Slam Dunk Kong. This is a surreal game. It's hard to get running because you've got to go through like a couple different layers of like, okay, we need to run DOSBox and then run this stuff inside of DOSBox and then
what I was using to play it was a fork of DOSBox that patched in save state support, which I would definitely recommend for this game. It's not too hard to find. The game itself, did I mention this already? You can only find it on one particular Russian abandonware site.
I did find an ISO on another site, but it like
you did,
but the download link didn't. It either didn't work or I wasn't doing something right because I couldn't recognize what language the site was in.
Oh, that's devastating.
So there was another site. Because
I do wonder if
Russian abandonware site.
If there is a CD version, then it might have that music in the levels that we were missing.
That's fair. I wonder if it's just Donkey Kong Country music. That wouldn't surprise me.
Well, the title screen's different.
That's fair. I don't know. This is so weird for a Chinese knockoff game, because usually you get Chinese knockoff games like Donkey Kong 5 Journey Over Time and Space, which is like just straight up uses Donkey Kong Country graphics among
and
other
Pokemon
things.
Pinball soundtrack, I think.
Yep. And or the Getsu Fumiden knockoff for Game Boy, that it's Getsu Fumiden, but it's got sort of like a European medieval fantasy aesthetic going on, except all the enemies are bootleg Pokemon sprites. And like the dragon boss at the end is borrowed from a different Game Boy game. And just stuff like that going on. Like that's what I'm used to seeing in Chinese knockoffs, where there's maybe like 30% original work to the thing, but a lot of it's just like stolen sprites from other like commercially released games or other Chinese knockoffs.
Yeah, and it's just slammed together so slapdashedly that it barely functions.
But this game is just completely original, and it's actually just drawing elements from a lot of different things and making it work together, and it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it is ripping off other things very heavily, but it's putting them together in a new way. It's making new stuff out of it. It's got original level designs.
Didn't just call itself Donkey Kong Country 4 or whatever. It actually called itself something new, and yeah,
it's not so blatant and audacious as that. It's worth pointing out the Third Wave did have some legitimacy. They were responsible for porting many games from both the West and Japan to the Taiwanese market. They were releasing ports of Koei's Three Kingdoms game. They did Dune 2, the strategy game, the classic PC one. They also there was one of the Rockman games they ported to PC.
Oh, interesting.
For Taiwan as well. So they had these big name contracts. They weren't just running out of someone's garage,
Yeah.
And they do make that point actually in that interview I mentioned earlier. They're talking to the head of the company, and he's talking about how hard it is to break into the Taiwanese market in a legitimate way because it's so dominated by piracy. And these bootleg games that you're talking about, you always get them on these multi-cart, pirate hardware. But Third Wave were really going for a sense of legitimacy, even though they're reusing stuff that other people have made for some of the aesthetics and content of this game.
God, it sounds like one of the studios I was working at was trying to break into the mobile market.
How did that turn out?
The studio's not around anymore.
Well, I don't think Third Wave is around anymore. They sort of transitioned into making enterprise software for businesses. Stuff about digitizing paperwork and things like that.
That's unfortunate. But
boring adult life stuff.
Yep.
No more slam dunk Kongs. This was one of their few original
Not with
works.
that attitude. I wonder if someone around still like owns this. I don't know. If it's on abandonware sites.
Well, lots of stuff goes on abandonware sites.
That's
without
fair.
permission.
That's super
I think that's
fair.
probably 90% of the content on some of the sites anyway. Some sites are conscientious about that. But yeah, I was talking about this yesterday, how the line between copyright and piracy and who owns what, and it's very complicated.
Yeah. I've run into this before where I've legitimately tried to track down who owns a thing for the purpose of like, hey, can we use this? Can we make a game with this IP? But it's from like a studio that no longer exists, and it's just kind of insane trying to figure out who owns what, and like in some cases the people who own the trademarks aren't necessarily the same people who own the IP.
And the people who made the game don't know what happened with the copyright.
Yeah, like I was able to track down one of the artists who worked on the thing, but like they don't know anything about like the upper management of a studio they did some freelance work for, a decade and a half ago type of stuff. And just, yeah, it's crazy. And that's just like within the US. I can't even imagine how it would be trying to track down all of that like across a language barrier in China.
But either way, Slam Dunk Kong, we appreciate it as a work of art. It's really cool. It's fascinating that it got made and that it got released and that it turned out the way it did. Like I said, it's quite difficult to play, frustrating perhaps, but it's worth it to experience what they've done with it.
Yeah. And like I said, like I don't even think it's necessarily outside of the scope of something that like Rare would have made themselves. Even in Donkey Kong Country 1, there's a ton of pastiching and homaging of like Temple of Doom and Return of the Jedi and stuff like that. So this sort of like, hey, let's get some Space Jam in here stuff going on. That's right in the wheelhouse of the sort of stuff Rare
Not a bad
did.
point, yes, indeed.
So
that's the DK Goethe thesis is Slam Dunk Kong is an intermediate stage between Junior and Donkey Kong in Donkey Kong Country.
Yep.
Same character. This is part of his life story, and it all happened.
That's our story, and we're sticking to it.
So thank you very much for joining us. This was a fun episode. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. See you next time.